Hello everyone and welcome back. Sweet dreams are made of screams. So, I would like to play a little game with you. After you listen to these stories, you are not allowed to move away from your bed, even if you hear your door creak, even if you see those red glowing eyes staring at you. So, grab your flashlight, 'cause it's the only thing that can save you tonight. I was a curious kid growing up. From the day I learned the word why, I never stopped asking it. Why do I have to go to bed at 8? Why can't we go see Santa at the North Pole? Why are daddy's feet bigger than mommy's? The other ones, the what, when, how and who questions, were not neglected either. Many questions were easily answered. Where does the sun go at night? And some, not so easy. Why is Uncle Greg always covered in bruises? At some point in every kid's life, they begin to fear monsters. How any kid even conjures the concept of a lurking monster is anyone's guess, and yet every child does. I'm sure each and every one of you can remember a time when you kept your closet shut because you were certain some unseen evil would snug you in the night. But not one of you can pinpoint the moment when you began to believe in the existence of such a thing. That is a question I've yet to answer. My monster du jour was the one under the bed. I feared the thing, and always made sure I had a stuffed animal on each side of me when I slept to guard me. Yet I was feverishly intrigued by it, for I never doubted the existence, but I wondered what it was doing under the bed. It was awfully cramped, so it had to come out eventually. What else did it go? Why was it afraid of teddy bears? I attempted to talk to it, but received no reply, and was reprimanded by my dad and told to go to sleep. So I decided to be brave. My mommy had always said, if you didn't know something, ask. So that's what I decided to do. Since it wouldn't come out to talk to me, I would go to it. Since I decided this was something I wasn't supposed to do, I waited until after they put me to bed to sneak underneath it. I decided, with my little kid logic, that light is the monster's weakness, and so I couldn't use any light to actually see it. I brought a flashlight, but I hoped to maybe get some of my other questions answered. I slipped under my bed, into the middle, and waited, and waited, and waited. I started to fall asleep, but was started awake by a hiss, very, very close to my ear. Then a gust of damp breath on my neck. The breath came out a dry, croaking rattle. Hiss, inhale, rattle, exhale. I'd gone in with every investigative intention, but at this crucial moment of truth, I abandoned all curiosity in the face of sheer terror. I went to turn on the flashlight, clenched in my hands, but froze. Or rather, my body was frozen. I could not move. A sickening pop sound, and something which I not realized had been pressed against my arm, shifted. It was as if something beneath the surface, or whatever was touching me, was moving. More cracks and pops, like I was trapped in a bag of popping corn. There was a grinding screeching of a fork being scraped across a plate of a dentist's drill, and then light. My room was awash with light. My head was still turned to the side, still paralyzed in that awkward position, and I expected to see the face of a demon, nose to nose. Instead, I saw feet, with a familiar daisy tattoo around one of her ankles. Then my mom's voice. "What are you doing out of bed?" Worse and more baffling than a monstrous face could have been, a second set of feet entered my view. These ones much smaller. "I had a nightmare," a second voice replied. My voice! Only I didn't say it. It came from the other me, the fake whose feet I saw. I tried to tell Mommy, but I couldn't make my tongue move any more than another part of my body, and I found I couldn't quite figure out how to make my voice work. "Well, I suppose you can sleep with us, just for tonight," my mom said, and the two left, and I was once again in the dark. I grew hungry, but could not move, forced to endure a sore belly and headache with no hint of relief. I was exhausted, but sleep never came. I saw my family, or at least their feet, often. I tried, but could not tell, could not be noticed. Even when they bent to peer under the bed, they looked beyond me, never seeing. The feet that would have been mine grew larger, and those of my parents wrinkled, Mom's tattoo fading. At some point, I stopped seeing my dad's feet, and then later, my mom's. My own, that of the other me, grew old, and they too disappeared. Then, all new feet, unfamiliar feet, the same two pair until a new set of feet joined, small feet, young feet. I waited there, for there was nothing else to do, until the child grew curious, as I had been, and I was finally granted freedom, and could live the life which had been stolen from me. Let me tell you this, I am not afraid of sleeping. In fact, it's probably the best thing in my schedule. I used to take 3-hour-long naps, completely wiping off any productive activity that I had that day. It's really a luxury. There's something that haunts me in my dreams. I know what a nightmare is. I used to get them all the time. Creepy crawlers and monsters were usually at the top of the list. What I saw in my dream wasn't a monster, but I wish it was. Has anyone ever told you that ghosts aren't real? Don't be silly. Ghosts can hurt you. Well, guess what? They are liars. They lie to protect you from the truth. Because if you don't believe in ghosts, ghosts can't harm you. I wish someone told me that ghosts weren't real. What I am about to tell you isn't a spooky ghost story that I made up on the spot. It's a warning. Ghost stories are there to lead you away from what real ghosts are like. They're not white and floating beings. They are much, much worse than that. It happened when I was 22, and I had just finished a boring early morning lecture. I was ready to take a long and well-needed nap, so I got to my dorm, told my roommate not to disturb me, and then I went to my room. It was a mess as always. I mean, without my mom there to tell me to clean it every other week, I haven't really been keeping tabs on the cleanliness. I lied to myself that I was going to clean it tomorrow. Then I hopped into bed without changing. I closed my eyes and I drifted off in an instant. After a few hours, I woke up. Or, at least I thought I did. Everything looked the same. No temperature changes either. I thought I had just woken up in a normal room. See, I didn't have a very keen eye. I didn't really realize any immediate changes. I was naive. I left my room and started for a bowl of cereal. That was when I looked out the kitchen window. It was dark, unusually dark. In fact, the kind of dark you would see if you close your eyes. There was no moon, and no clouds, and no lamps. My kitchen window has a clear view of the university, and I often like to watch people going about their day. It was always brightly lit, and watching people head back to their dorm rooms, tired and probably drunk, amused me. The university was not there. This sparked me as odd. I mean, the university was always there, and the lights could probably be seen from space. I put my bowl on the counter and took a closer look. The university was gone, but something else replaced it. I couldn't see it before because it blended in with the darkness. It was a person. It was my roommate. He was the only thing around for as far as I can see, and he had to at least be half a mile away. He almost completely blended in, apart from his eyes. A bright green that wasn't right. His eyes were brown, not green. Maybe it wasn't my roommate. I mean, the figures looked like him, but I'm not sure. A lot of people had the same figure. That's when he pointed at me. He stretched his hand and pointed straight at the window. Something wasn't right. His arm was stretching further and further towards my window. That was when the screams came. With every inch he stretched his arm, the blood-curdling, ear-piercing screams were swung at me like a bag of rocks hitting my stomach. I got thrown back just by the waves of sound. Actually, no. I could see the waves emitting from his mouth, waves of blood. The window was closed, but it came through just as easily, as if it were air. I instinctively ran to my room, but no matter where I went, the scream followed. There was no window in my room. The only room in the house with no window. I had to be safe here. I heard the kitchen glass shatter. I peered through the cracks in my bedroom door, but my roommate... No, that thing must have turned the goddamn lights off. My room thankfully was still lit. I reached for my phone in my drawer and dialed the police. I didn't even know what they would do, but I dialed them anyway. That's what you're supposed to do, right? The operator picked up. Police, fire services, or ambulance? She asked in a cheerful manner. Police, police, please! I replied, my voice hoarse. Don't be rude, sir, the operator responded. What? Look, okay, someone is in my dorm. I don't know where I am or what's happening, I replied again, shocked that she had called me rude. What the hell is going on here? Sir, the voice was different now, and louder and clearer, and a lot deeper like a growl. Don't be rude. And that's when I realized what had happened. The screams had stopped, and all I heard from the other side was, Now, I'll ask you again. Police, ambulance, or fire services? The door burst open. The figure was standing in my room. The light had busted, and now I was standing there. I threw my phone at the wall in shock, probably cracking it. The entity stood with the same finger, pointing at me. That was when I woke up. I was sweating all over. It was a nightmare, I thought. It was all a nightmare. I opened my eyes. The door was fine. It was light outside. I checked next door to find my roommate on his PS4. All was fine. The clock had stopped working a few days before, so I went to check the drawer to find my phone. It wasn't there. In the corner of my room was my old phone, cracked in several places. I turned it on. There was a single black line of text on a grey background. 2 words that have haunted me to this day. Sweet dreams. This story takes place about 2.5 years ago, and I still haven't been able to explain or figure out exactly what I saw. Okay, so this story isn't too intense or dramatic, just strange, I guess. I was sitting on my bed, my bedside lamp still on, as I stared blankly at my phone, as I often did at the time of night, roughly 1 a.m. Because my old room was originally a family room, second living room. There was no fourth wall and no door, the only thing separating me from my front hallway being a set of wooden room dividers. So, there was a gap between the wall and dividers that substituted a doorway. Anyways, I was and still am a pretty paranoid person. So, I often found myself glancing up at my makeshift doorway out into our front hallway. On one end of the hallway was the front door. On the other, you take a right and you're immediately in the kitchen. On this night, I was having a conversation with a friend who was also still awake, talking about something that obviously wasn't important enough to be remembered. As my paranoia got the better of me once again, I glanced out into the hallway. Normally, I'd have been satisfied with the dark, empty hallway and gone back to my conversation. I didn't though, and I don't know why. It was one of those moments, one that you get a sense of nervousness, like if I looked away, something would appear and jump out at me. I stared blankly at the darkness, my mind now tiredly wandering and my eyes growing out of focus. Then, breaking through the silence, a small noise had made me jump. The best way I can describe it is like when the bare feet of a really light person hit tiled flooring. I don't know what made that noise, or even if it was related to what happened next. It's just something I remember. In a split second, a dark humanoid shape shot past the doorway to the left. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds, blinking and trying to figure out if what I saw was even real. I was already uneasy before, so naturally now I was freaked out. I texted my friend from earlier about it, but she just brushed it off, telling me it was probably just me being paranoid and seeing things. I tried so hard to believe her. About 5 minutes passed with nothing, and I was beginning to calm down. Having gone back to mindless scrolling through my phone, I was watching some compilation video on YouTube, when for some reason my brain told me something was wrong, and I just stopped. I turned my phone off, stopped everything I was doing, and listened, really not wanting to look up from my blankets. But I did. I slowly turned my gaze up once again, and of course saw nothing. I was in the middle of laughing the whole night off, when it happened again. The shadow shot past my door again, this time to the right. I bolted upright, now fully awake. It was getting harder and harder to convince myself I was just imagining things. That night, I really have no idea if I ended up falling asleep. I probably didn't, just stared at the hallway and waiting for whatever it was to jump out at me. It never did, and I never saw it again. Well, bit of an anticlimactic one, but I just wanted to share it. I've had quite a few odd experiences growing up, this one being one of the least dramatic ones. Nonetheless, it still puzzles me, years after. My brother and cousins and I used to play a game whenever we had a sleepover. It was simple. We'd stay up and scare the living fuck out of each other. When we were at Erin and Kyle's house, it was the scariest by far. Her house was haunted. That's what everyone said. Even her parents knew it. "Don't worry about Mr. Toombs," they'd say. "He's harmless." Then they'd laugh and go back to what they were doing. Mr. Toombs was the man who owned the house before Erin's parents. He died all alone, and no one realized he was gone until many months later. Even though the house got renovated before it went on the market, we had this feeling he died in the basement. The air there just felt thick and heavy, like old sore breath. We'd have our sleepovers a few times a month. Our parents all worked at the same factory. Whenever they had to take third shift, we'd neither stay at home, and Erin and Kyle would come to our house, or Greg, and I would go over to Erin and Kyle's. I never minded all the moving around, until Kyle said we had to play that game. I hated it. Kyle was the oldest and could be mean if he wanted to. He wasn't a bully. He usually knew when to back off, but he still liked to get this way, and that meant we'd have to play that sleeping game. The first time we played the sleeping game, we were at our house. The four of us went in our sleeping bags in the living room, and Kyle started to tell a really terrifying story about a skinny alien that comes through the window and cuts you up into your bed. Greg, Erin, and I hated that story, but I could tell Erin was especially horrified. She was only 6. I kept telling Kyle to take it easy on his sister, but he was relentless. To Erin's credit, she didn't cry, but I think that was a problem. He probably would have stopped if she had. The game went like this. After the story, you weren't allowed to get out of your sleeping bag. No matter how scared you were, you could not get up to get water. You could not go to the bathroom, and under no circumstances could you run upstairs to get comfort from your grown-ups. If you did, you'd have to get an Indian burn from the rest of the group. The night of the alien story, I couldn't stop looking at the living room windows. Whenever a car went by and cast its lights against the wall, I'd shiver and feel my balls drawing up into my body while goosebumps rose on the back of my neck. Stupid. Greg and Kyle were asleep already. Erin, whose sleeping bag was next to mine, was crying to herself. "I need to pee," she whispered, "and I am too scared to get up, and I don't want to get an Indian burn when I get back." I looked at Greg and Kyle. They were both completely out. "Go ahead," I whispered. "I won't tell anyone." Erin gave me a tight-lipped smile and snuck out of her sleeping bag and padded down the hallway. Right around when I assumed I would hear the bathroom door close, she screamed. It was a shrill, horror-filled explosion from her tiny lungs, and the three of us, now wide awake, vaulted from our sleeping bags in her direction. We got there a couple of seconds before my parents were thundering down the steps. They flipped on the lights. Erin was in the corner of the bathroom, sobbing. Her pajama pants were soaked. Mom picked her up and held her to her chest and asked what had happened. "The alien," Erin whimpered, then pointed to the shower curtain. Dad opened it. Nothing was there. "It was just a shadow, honey," Dad told her. He glared at us. "Come with me, boys," he ordered, and brought us back into the living room while Mom drew a bath for Erin. After a long lecture from my father, we agreed to not tell any more scary stories. Erin eventually came back to her sleeping bag, and with Dad snoring on the couch, we all went to sleep. The next night, of course, brought more stories. They were much tamer, though. Greg told a damp one about a lady who gets pulled into a grave by a killer. I told an even worse one about some teenager whose baby brother's head came off. Erin actually laughed at that one. It was so bad. We got ready to go to sleep, still bound by the agreement that we couldn't get up for any reason until it was morning. At some point in the middle of the night, Greg shook me awake. "Hey, we got Erin coming back from the bathroom." She was already rubbing her arm in discomfort from the burn. Greg grabbed her other one and twisted, making Erin yelp. I took her arm and just squeezed it a little. I felt bad. Months went by, and we played the sleeping game every time we were together. Everyone got caught at least one trying to sneak out. Indian burns were hot by all. Erin, though, got the most. It was obvious she wasn't having any fun. To make matters worse, she looked exhausted on the morning after we played. I brought it up to Kyle, and he thought about it for a minute, then said we do it once a month instead of every time. I didn't argue. We kept a little agreement to ourselves because we didn't want Erin to think we were treating her like a baby. That night we were sleeping at their house. They had a beautifully furnished basement with a big screen TV, a ping-pong table, and all sorts of other fun stuff. We set up our sleeping bags and played video games until after 10 p.m. My aunt came down and said to turn it all off and get to sleep. So we make like we were getting ready for bed, but when the lights went out, Kylie said it was time to play the sleeping game. I groaned, but he shot me a look and mouthed, "Only one," to me. At least, he was holding up his end of the bargain. Like we always did, anyone who needed to get up to pee or get a drink beforehand was allowed to. I went followed by Kyle, then Erin. We all came back. In the glow of the flashlight Kyle liked to hold under his chin when he told his stories, Kyle started to talk about a ghost. The ghost, Mr. Toombs. Even Greg looked uncomfortable as he stared at the closed wooden door. Mr. Toombs waits until you sleep and sucks your breath into his lungs. The longer you sleep, the more he takes away, and if you sleep for too long, you won't have any air left to breathe and you'll be dead. My eyes were wide with fear, and Greg just stared at the ground. Kyle, too, looked like he had successfully startled himself. Erin, surprisingly, had actually managed to go to sleep first, despite bawling her eyes out by the end of the story and making Kyle promise to give her his snack at lunch or else she'd tell on him. I snuck her one of the lifesaver candies I'd stashed away to help her feel better. I guess it worked. The rest of us tried to go to sleep. Kyle caught me getting up to pee and gave me a wicked Indian burn. But since he caught me while he was on his way to the bathroom himself, I gave him one too. Hard. He punched me in the arm and I punched him in the balls. I won. We tiptoed back into the basement and got into our sleeping bags. It was the worst night's sleep I'd ever had. Each time the furnace kicked on, I knew I'd see Mr. Toombs floating above my sleeping bag, ready to suck the life out of me. Like always, my aunt came downstairs in the morning to wake us up for school. She started with gentle calls, then hollers, then shouts, then, since we always ignored her, she stomped down the stairs and threatened to haul us out of the sleeping bags. "Let's go," she ordered. "Get dressed and go get your breakfast, Erin. If I had to ask you again, I'm gonna flash your goldfish." Erin didn't budge. "I swear to God, Erin, Goldine's going down into the sewer with the Ninja Turtles in 3, 2, 1. Nothing. Concern flashed across my aunt's face. Kyle, who'd been sleeping next to her, shook his sister. She didn't respond. My aunt rushed across the room and pulled Erin to her. She hung limply out of the sleeping bag. Everything went really fast for a while. The ambulance came while my aunt and uncle screamed and cried, and Kyle, Greg and I just sat there in stunned silence. My parents arrived soon after. They were also crying. We were all asked if we saw her drink any alcohol or take any medicine. None of us had. Someone went into the bathroom and returned with an empty bottle of sleeping pills that'd been in the medicine cabinet. Through the years, my aunt insisted that the bottle had been empty to begin with, that she'd been saving it so she could remember which kind had worked for her, so she could get it again. But there was no other explanation at the time. Erin was dead. There was a funeral. It was terribly sad. But I went on with my life. Everyone did. I learned years later that the toxicology reports had been negative and Erin's death had been ruled an accidental asphyxiation. They blamed the sleeping bag and my aunt and uncle sued for millions. When Greg was moving out before his first year of college, I was asked to help load the van. I didn't want to, but I helped anyway. Some of the heavier things were boxed up in an unfurnished part of the cellar. I went down and tried not to think about poor Erin. When I opened the door, I remembered that feeling I got the first time I'd been there. An image of Mr. Toombs flashed through my head. I shivered, but then I noticed the familiar strange heaviness in the air. I noticed the smell. It was different from the sour odor that I'd remembered. The smell was sweet, like the breath of someone who'd eaten a lime lifesaver. I've always had a fascination with the paranormal and supernatural. As a kid, I would scare my grandmother by drawing pictures of aliens, ghosts, and vampires on the bulletins at church. So, needless to say, I was a little disappointed a few years ago when my soon-to-be wife, Emily, and I moved into a small house in my hometown that had absolutely no creepy backstory and no ominous reputation in the neighborhood. It was just a simple little house, big enough for the two of us and maybe one more in the future. The previous owner of the house had lived there since it had been built in the 50s and had passed away in a nearby nursing home the presenting year. Her kids were the ones who sold it to us, and they had not been terribly thorough in cleaning it out. There were a couple of random clothes hangers left in the closet, ancient air fresheners stuck to the undersides of cabinets, half-empty bottles of cleaning fluid with labels that hadn't been produced in decades. The only things of value that had been left, however, I found in the attic. There is no ladder to it, just a square hole in the whole ceiling covered by a panel that drops into place. I borrowed Emily's father's a frame ladder and opened it up while exploring my new kingdom. In the attic, I found a faded old hat box, a suitcase from the late 80s, and a tied-up black trash bag. The box was full of old wedding things from a ceremony long ago. I don't know if it was the previous owner of the house in the photos. The suitcase was mouldy but empty. The trash bag, on the other hand, was full and bulging all along its stretched surface. Carefully, I dragged the bag down the ladder and outside to avoid letting mold and plastic dust escape into the new home. As the bag ripped and tore, I could see what looked like fur producing from the fresh openings. I was relieved to find the shredded bag was crammed full of stuffed animals. I split the doors onto the driveway, hands covered in rubber gloves, face shielded with a work mask, and began sorting through them. Most were teddy bears of various size and color. One was a dog with big sad eyes and a dark stain on its ear. And there was one lone baby doll, whose hair was matted and melted together with time and heat. I had no choice but to throw all the toys into the trash bin. They were filthy with mold and God knows what else, and I had the feeling that no amount of washing would make them lovable again. As I was cleaning up the remains of the trash bag, I found one more thing that I hadn't seen fall out. It was several pieces of paper folded together. The yellowed pages had been tri-folded like a letter and folded in half again, making a small thick rectangle. In later years, I have wondered how I could have missed it at first. But on that day, I was too curious about it to even notice. Sitting down on the driveway, I carefully unfolded it. It appeared to me a letter of some sort. The handwriting was messy but not legible, and it started quite officially with the standard, "To whom it may concern." There were places on every page where it looked like someone else had scribbled in the margins. It was never anything relevant to what was being said, usually just the name Jennifer over and over again. In some places, swear words were written over the main body of the letter in a heavy hand. I read through it that first time with a morbid curiosity. I devoured it. What follows is a transcript of that letter. To whom it may concern. I hope there is no one reading this. No one should ever read this. My name is Jones, and I am not insane. Most would probably say that I am, but I assure you that I am not. My story begins with a damn man on the street. I saw him for the first time 2 years ago. He was on the street corner, begging for money. He was dirty, old, and crooked. His hat lay on the ground at his feet, and he simply looked with those pathetic watery eyes. 2 weeks later, I saw the same man again, this time in the park. But now, he was not simply standing there, but dancing around his hat like an organ monkey. Every so often, he would stop, swat at his jacket, and yell at some woman named Jennifer. He would then continue with his dancing. People walking by would stop and stare. A few tossed small coins into his hat. No one spoke to him. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to watch him. I stood and watched from a distance for nearly 30 minutes until, all of a sudden, the man stopped dead in his dance and looked me directly in the eye. At that moment, I felt a faintness and nausea wash over me. I went several months after that without seeing that disgusting beggar. I avoided the park in the corner where I had first encountered him, so I figured I had circumvented him. That was until the man showed up right outside my apartment building. As I left for my walk to work, He was sitting on the steps, hat in hand, eyes peering into the nothingness in front of him. He mumbled to himself as the people of the city ignored him entirely. I moved to the opposite side of the steps and cautiously made my way to the sidewalk, but I needed to pass directly in front of the man to continue on my way. I stilled my nerves. I lifted my nose to the air to avoid eye contact. Despite all my efforts, as I crossed the man's eye line, he shot from his perch and gripped my arm in his filthy hands. I was taken completely off my guard by his swiftness, and I stood there, frozen in shock. He leaned his head close to mine and whispered in my ear. And what he said, "What's mine is yours, old friend," he hissed. I felt the blood draining from my face. As quickly as he had reached me, he let go and was gone. I don't know if he truly vanished, or if he simply faded into the morning commuters, but either way, he had left me. I immediately moved to the stair and wrenched my breakfast into the gutter. Never in my life had I felt so violated, so assaulted. This awful man had grabbed me right there in the street, surrounded by people, and yet no one else even batted an eye. It was insulting. I stood up after a moment and began yelling to see if anyone could help me find the man. But it was if I were yelling at thin air. I never saw the old man again in person, but his words will haunt me till the day I die. And that is when the things got worse. It began small, as such things go, with flashes and dreams. Every so often, a woman would come to me in my sleep. She was attractive, young. Her features, or what I can recall from the dreams, were subtle and cute. Her voice, a pleasant buzz in my mind. She started invading my dreams more frequently. I thought of her when I was awake as well. This dream girl, so charming and sweet, was even present in my consciousness. This lasted for a few months or so, her presence growing stronger all the while. Then came the day when things started shifting. My dreams turned sour. The pleasant imagery went dark, and I dreamed of people dying, cities falling, destruction, and always there she was, in the middle of everything. I got little rest during those days, but still, they were just dreams. What harm could they cause? How little I knew then. Months passed, and one day, there she was, not in a dream, but in a street. I first saw her from behind standing at a crosswalk, could not see her face, but her stature, her posture, even her hair, was exactly like the woman I knew. The light turned, and she was lost in a sea of men and women crossing the road. The next day she was there again, at the same crosswalk, only this time she was facing my direction and I could clearly see her face. She stared directly at me, as though we were the only people in the city. I rushed forward to get to her, but by the time I reached her corner, she was gone again. Every day I saw the woman in the street. Then it became twice a day. Then 3 times she showed up at my office, at the market, in the drugstore, and yet I could never quite reach her. Eventually, perhaps inevitably, she appeared in my apartment. That evening I came home, hung up my coat and hat, and nearly jumped clean out of my skin as she was standing by my kitchen sink. The expression on her face was not the pleasant smile I had grown fond, but the dark smile of the destroyer I had seen more recently. As I stared, she tilted back her head, opened her mouth, and let out the most horrifying screech I had ever heard. She laughed herself toward me at a frightening speed, still wailing at the top of her lungs. I recoiled in reflex, squeezing my eyes tightly and bracing for impact, but none ever came. The echo of the wail faded, and I opened my eyes to find myself alone. After that, all hell broke loose. This woman began appearing to me at all hours of the day, in all manner of company, and she also began talking. Her voice had the same honeyed ring I remembered from my dreams. She would tell me things about the people around me, horrible things they would never tell anyone. She would mock me viciously about my appearance of my personality, She would sing blasphemous songs about all the ways I could die, and I was the only one who could see or hear her. I got concerned stares from people when I would interact with her. She baited me into fighting with her, both verbally and physically. The horror on people's faces when this happened. I was not right in the head, and people began to avoid me because of it. The harassment I went through at the hands of this spectral and horrifying woman cost me everything. I was relieved of my position at work for being a disruptive presence. What did they know about disruptive presences? My own family refused to have anything to do with me anymore. Even my landlord kicked me out of my apartment. I was utterly alone, except for the woman who I had begun calling Jennifer. I called her this simply because that was the name I had heard that awful man yell out so long ago. She never offered up her own name, so I used the one given by her precious haunt. Jennifer was always there. Although I never had human companionship, I was never truly alone. She did not let me sleep or talk to anyone or even think for too long before she began screaming at me. Her voice had become the distractive background noise of my everyday life, a life which now consisted of wandering the streets, begging for change on corners and in parks, and finding some wretched back alley or bridge to try to sleep in at night. Over time, Jennifer's torment began to include demands. She demanded blood. She promised that she would leave me alone if I took the lives of those around me. She would scream endlessly, urging me to kill. I wish I could say that I was strong and ignored her, but I no longer had that kind of strength. On 2 occasions, I stalked fellow homeless men in the park and stabbed them in their sleep. To my horror, these offerings only seemed to make Jennifer stronger. I had lost track of how long it has been since this all began, but it must have been years, at least. Over all that time, I have come to one conclusion. She had told me repeatedly that if I were to die, my soul would never find rest, unless I found a fitting tribute. It took me far too long to realize what she was saying. I remembered the old man, his horrid expression as he leaned close to my ear. I think I now know what I must do. But I would not wish this curse upon my worst enemies. I will try and hide this letter away so that it never be found. I will consign my spirit to an eternity of damnation if it means that no one else would have to endure what I have. But if you do find this, please know I am sorry. Whoever you are, that is mine, is now yours. Sincerely regretful, Jones. I must have read the letter 100 times within a week. I didn't know what to make of it. There was no way of telling who had written it or when. I had no idea how it had gotten into my attic or why it was packed away with a bunch of forgotten stuffed animals. It was all so weird. I never shared it with my wife either, nor that I was scared it might be true. I just had a feeling that I shouldn't. I wanted to keep it as my own little secret. I almost felt protective of it. The letter has been sitting in my sock drawer for 3.5 years. I've taken it out to read it at least once a month since I found it. It's no surprise that I have had dreams about this mysterious ghost woman. I dream about video games if I've been playing enough, and I am also not surprised that my dreams followed a very similar pattern. They started out sweet and kind. She was gentle and would sing to me as we walked through beautiful countrysides. Then they started turning dark, as I knew they would. I've seen my house burning. I've seen horrible car crashes, all centered around this woman. I figured it was all a part of my overactive imagination mixed with some obvious obsession with that man's story. No big deal. That is, until about a week ago. I saw her. She was at the store. I saw her standing at the end of every aisle as my wife and I walked through looking for groceries, and I have seen her every day since. I know what I have to do, and I want to do it before things get worse. I don't even know if this is going to work over the internet, but I am so sorry if it does. But what is mine is now yours. A month ago, a good friend of mine told me a rather disturbing incident that he had experienced. Then, this morning, he called in utter panic. "He's back! He's here! The scratches, the marks, they were on the inside. Inside this time. How did he get in again? I don't know what's going on." Obviously, this makes no sense to you. So let me tell you about the incident that my friend told me about a month ago. Robert and I go way back. We've been friends since high school. Robert was always the daredevil without any fear. He would drag me to horror movies, on double dates, and make fun of how scared I was of the paranormal. Robert's fierceness came from his ability to break down every situation and come back with a logical explanation for everything. In college, we chose different career paths. I decided to be an engineer, while he worked towards getting a degree in accounting. We've both been out of college a few years now and have been working for different companies. Things were great at work for both of us. We work in the same area, so every once in a while we would grab lunch to catch up. Now, the incident he told me about dealt with a specific co-worker of Robert's named Aaron. This past month, Robert started talking about this new hire at his company that was very quickly becoming popular. I'm telling you, everyone loves this Aaron guy, but there is something off about him, something that doesn't sit well with me, Robert told me. I laughed it off, saying he was being paranoid. But then, he started telling me these strange stories involving Aaron. First off, Aaron had a habit of appearing behind Robert whenever he was working in his cubicle. I'm serious, man, I don't even hear him. God knows how long he just stands there, but when I turn around, I get startled every time. He has this grin on his face, and most of the time he won't even say anything and just walk away. I tried asking others about this guy, but they say he never does it. Heck, even the people around my cube don't notice him creep out on me. They think I'm being paranoid, Robert told me in frustration. This interaction didn't seem too strange to me, as Aaron could just be messing with Robert. And let's be real, we all know a guy like this at work. But then, there was the supply room incident. At Robert's workplace, they have a small storeroom in the basement for office supplies. One time Robert went down to get some supplies when he found Aaron in the corner of the supply room in complete darkness. I didn't even know he was there until I turned on the light and realized he was standing in the corner of the room. At first, I thought he was trying to jump scare me, but something wasn't right. He looked like he was in some sort of trance. His finger was on his mouth. His eyes were open as wide as humanly possible. He didn't turn his head, but moved his eyes to look at me. He didn't say a word except "shh" with a finger on his lips. To be honest, I was a little freaked out. I didn't know how to react, and I didn't want to confront him, so I just grabbed what I needed and left. Later I found him chatting up our manager, and he smiled at me as if nothing had happened. Ever since the supply room incident, Robert started noticing Aaron in his neighborhood. I know for a fact that he lives on the other side of town, yet I see him in the Walmart right next to my apartment. I felt like he followed me, but I couldn't be sure. Now, his stories were starting to weird me out a bit. That was until one morning, and demanded that I come over to his apartment immediately. When I got to Robert's apartment, he was a complete mess. He was shaking, unable to form proper sentences. I've never seen him this scared. I sat him down, and once he had recovered a bit, he told me about what happened the previous night. I got home late last night from work. I immediately passed out. Didn't even have a chance to change. But then, I woke up in the middle of the night, I'd say around 1:30 a.m. I don't know why or how I woke up, but I felt like something was there. I felt like someone else was in the apartment, so I decided to get up and take a look around. I walked out of my living room, turned on the lights. Nothing. The room was empty. With a sigh of relief, I turned around to go back to bed, but before I could switch the light back off, I heard it. I heard a shh. When I looked back into my living room, there he was, Aaron, standing in the corner, with that same crazed wide-eyed look in his eyes, like he was stuck in a trance again, finger on his lips. Shh. Now you know me. I'm a logical guy. This shit doesn't scare me. I don't believe in paranormal stuff. So I confronted him. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? I'll call the cops. Aaron, is this a sick joke? Seriously, dude, what the... But before I could finish, he did something that is hard to describe. He took his finger off his lips. He showed his teeth. And then he got on all fours. It was so sick. And then he started crawling towards me, with a disturbed grin on his face. And he wasn't just crawling. He was charging at me. I freaked the hell out. This wasn't normal behavior. A grown man just doesn't do that. I ran back to my room, barely shut the door in time, and barricaded myself in, only to realize I left my phone and laptop on the living room table. I was up the remainder of the night, and I heard scratching sounds on my door all night. I could hear him breathing. He just sat on the other side of the door, scratching. When the sun came up, it finally stopped. That's when I stepped out and called you. I continued to call him down, trying to wrap my head around what he had just told me. Before I could even say anything, Robert saw the look on my face. No, damn it. It wasn't some nightmare. I'm not on drugs. I know that's what you're going to say. But come here, explain this. He showed me the door. On the outside, it looked like someone had scratched a shape. It looked like a distorted, smiley face. I decided to skip work that day and spend the day with Robert, as we ran through different explanations of what happened. The other part, the one part we could not explain, was how he got in and out. His door was double-bolted all along. There was no other point of entry or exit. For the following week, I decided it was best that Robert spend his nights at my place, just to be safe. Strangely, Aaron stopped showing up at work after that night, which confirmed the fact that there was truth to Robert's story. After that week, things started going back to normal, and Robert went back to staying in his apartment. And now, back to the present, when he called me this morning. When I went over to his apartment, this time, the scratching on the door was on the inside. This time, it was a distorted, frowny face. I woke up and realized my phone was missing, so when I went to the living room, I found everything was out of place. Things had been moved around. When I finally found my phone, there was a note typed on the screen that read, "I left you a present on your door again." That's when I knew it was him. So right now, I'm spending the night with Robert, and we have equipped ourselves with some baseball bats. Since we really don't have any concrete evidence to get the police involved, we are going to see this through ourselves for now. I'm going to start doing some research. If you guys have any ideas as to what might be going on, I'm all ears. I will update soon, assuming we survive the night if he shows up again. Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. If you're not getting notifications about my new videos, please make sure to click the bell icon, cause YouTube lately doesn't like to notify anyone. Take care, and I will see you all in my next video.